InsightLA and welcoming you to our Sunday morning sitting group, which has been going on for many years. And I'm really appreciative of all of you who keep coming through the pandemic, through Zoom. I don't know when we're going to resume in-person meetings. We had hoped, I think everybody was hoping, I don't know when, in June, or it just seemed like here, at least in Southern California, the pandemic was coming to an end and we would be able to gather. And now we are postponing that because of the variant. But whenever we do gather, I want to reassure you, we will figure out some kind of hybrid so that those of you who are from Montreal and Mexico and Austria and different places can still be part of our group. That's really important. Yeah. So this morning I'll do, for those of you who may be new, we have a half an hour of meditation and then some teaching and then some time to be in dialogue with each other. And this morning I want to talk about basically inner and outer, external and internal mindfulness and compassion, just continuing from last week's talk about compassion and courage. So I'll do some guided meditation and we'll have some chance to be together, alone together in the silence. I want to encourage you to find some framework for your body that you can comfortably be in for about half an hour, whatever that might be. And often I encourage people to relax during the meditation instruction, but sometimes if you're agitated or traumatized for something that has happened or something you're going through from your past, the instruction or the invitation rather to relax can be, I don't know, it can almost feel like being asked to do something that you just can't do right now. So whatever I may invite as part of the guided meditation, really just take it with a grain of salt. Take what might be useful to you and just leave the rest. It's never one size fits all, and yet we're all here together. So hopefully whatever prompts are general enough for you to find them helpful. And as I've shared with you before, I personally am not that fond of guided meditations and meditation guidance. So when the guidance is happening, if you just ignore me, it's up to you. And Caroline, just keep an eye out for people still arriving, okay? Okay, so let's sit together. I'd like to begin with a few intentional deep breaths. Just breathing in, breathing out, releasing any tension you may be holding. Breathing in and relaxing as you breathe out. One more time. So this morning's invitation is to simply rest the attention with the movement of the breath in and out of the body. Being mindful of the sensations of breathing, the actual felt experience of this ebb and flow of the breath. Bringing mindful attention to this is a way to connect with this moment of your life. And if the breath isn't in any way soothing or calming for you, just being aware of the sounds of life around you as they appear and disappear. Or whatever sensations may be happening in the body. Sound, sensation, breath awareness. All of these help us stay tuned to this particular moment in the vast expanse of time and space. We don't hear yesterday's sounds or tomorrow's. I can't feel the sensations of yesterday or know what the sensations of tomorrow will be like. And each breath in, each breath out is unique, irreplaceable, and only happening right now. And as the attention meanders around and wanders into the past or future, just gently shepherding back to this breath, this sound or silence, this feeling in the body. And noticing who is aware of being present or distracted, of being sleepy or wide awake. Who is noticing? This is awareness. Awareness is noticing. Awareness is, meditation is a bridge to awareness. The mindful attention we bring to sitting, to meditating together, leads us to awareness. Awareness is always here for me, always here for you. Listening and still. And awareness can be loving because awareness has no opinions or ideas or views or judgment of you or of what's happening to you. It is in that way, a kind of loving, accepting witness. And this is the power of mindfulness. It's a way to touch base, to connect with this loving awareness. It's a much bigger reality. That can help even when things are bad. Loving awareness can be a support. Helping to steady amidst the waves. Allowing moments of stillness. To connect with the wisdom, the guidance that awareness can offer. Anytime we're willing to step back and receive it, receive this moment. However it may be. So today I am speaking to you from the unceded lands of the Tongva and Keats indigenous peoples. And I was looking for Conda Mason, a colleague teacher, created this extended welcome to all beings, all shapes and sizes and genders and races and classes and ages and abilities, and just going through all the categories, this beautiful extended welcome. And I couldn't find it, but I have it somewhere. I'll welcome next week, but I just want to welcome you all and to just offer a bow to my teachers, and especially the teacher of teachers in this tradition, the Buddha, the historical Buddha, but also the Buddha as understood to be in living awareness, this loving awareness that we can all connect to when we come together and take the time in this way. And all traditions, whether secular or spiritual, they're all always changing. And if you are a student of Buddhism, for example, you will notice that so much of the philosophy and the psychology and the methodology, the skillful means, the upaya, these things have been changing across the generations. And it's almost like a conversation that cascades down the generations, a conversation between scholars and practitioners and commentators and teachers, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating to watch, and it continues today. It continues in the American mindfulness movement. It continues in Buddhist studies, and it's always being sort of redefined and reconfigured by different situations, political and cultural, and all kinds of different conditions. And I like this. I think it's beautiful. I think it's rich. There are always some conflicts or dialogues between innovators and conservators, and we need them both. We need the people who really want to conserve and preserve the tradition, and somebody's waiting, Caroline, thank you. And we also need the people who are creative and innovating and changing things and bringing freshness and aliveness and new perspectives to the teachings as they are today. So I wanted to speak a little bit about this in relation to the teaching from the Satipatthana, the Mindfulness Sutra in the early Buddhist teachings, the Theravada teaching, where the Buddha placed a great emphasis on a balance between inner and outer awareness, between external and internal mindfulness. And this is really important for us today. It's important all the time, but just historically, in terms of my generation of practitioners, a lot of people, well, at the beginning, we were really most of the practices at the beginning, the original bringing of these practices of mindfulness and compassion by the Western teachers, but also by our Asian teachers for sure. They focused initially on the individual. And this was important because, well, as you can see, look around, look at yourself, we live in a culture where people are so outer focused, and this really hasn't changed much, but so outer focused. We didn't know how, as young adults, to sit and be quiet, to just sit with ourselves and be quiet. And I think the same is true. I mean, I see it with my grandkids. One is still 17, but one is 20, a young adult. And I see it with her too, that it's almost scary to her to be without her phone for more than, 10 minutes, without, glancing at it and seeing what's happening and checking in and making sure. But just to be able to feel and experience what was going on in my own mind and my own heart, and to learn to do that with awareness and kindness, that was huge. That was revelatory, really. It was just huge. But I think especially the Western teachers, not so much my Asian teachers, left out the whole half of that other instruction about the outer mindfulness, the outer awareness of what's happening around us. And I really feel grateful to my first teacher, the Korean Zen master, De Sansanim. I talk about him often. And I hope he knows somehow, somewhere, because he put a lot of emphasis on collective practice, group practice. He actually wanted us all to live together in residential centers and practice together that way, because he said it was like, it was the best way to shed attachments and habits. I said the analogy he used, his analogies were very practical, not very poetic, but very practical. The analogy he used was potatoes boiling together in a pot, and how you don't have to peel them because they boil and boil, and they bump up against each other and they get peeled that way. For me, moving into the center, which I did, but I was a single mom and it wasn't really the best place for raising kids in those days. I didn't really have to, I admit, it's not really pleasant to be like a potato in boiling water being skinned. But that is something of the experience of living with people who are not your chosen people to live with, and with whom you need to create community somehow and get together and, run a center and take good care of it and take good care of the people who come, and just keep it clean, and who's going to cook and who's going to, all of those things. But it turns out that when we include this outer or external mindfulness, that we can do this better once we've learned how within ourselves to sit with our own whatever may be going on, to expand what Dan Siegel calls the window of tolerance for our own suffering with mindfulness and with self-compassion, that we can actually begin to do that, of course, for those who are around us more and more, and expand that circle of care more and more. But it does need to include, if not begin with, us, with me, with you, with each one of us. And when, what it says in the sutta, and it's something that with practice we do see, that finally, in the end, they're not separate, that the suffering in me is not separate from the suffering in you. And the suffering of me, as if I identify and locate myself, as a white, Jewish, cisgender, heterosexual, female, in my various roles, familial, professional, and so forth, the suffering that is located in this body, in this location, it's still suffering. It's, even though your body, your location, your roles in society, your history and experiences are different from mine. And I think in these past years, there's really been a shift, a very welcome shift, but it's not easy either. But there's been a shift to include and acknowledge the need for this mindfulness, both inner and outer. And if one side is missing, if either side is missing, it's really problematic. This past week, I had the opportunity to meet with a young Buddhist scholar named Nalika Najawira. She's from Sri Lanka, from a practicing Buddhist family, and is a scholar at USC. And she wrote a paper, which is why I got in touch with her and wanted to meet with her, because I really loved her paper. And I should have found the link for you to put in, Caroline. You can find it because if you put in Nalika, Nalika, Gajawera, Gagaweera, the article is called Sitting in the Fire Together, People of Color Cultivating Radical Resilience in North American Insight Meditation. You don't need that whole subtitle, but it's in the Journal of Global Buddhism. So you can find it online, and then you can put the link in for people. Because she's really writing about something that she's really writing about safe spaces and the movement from understanding one's individual suffering to understanding that it's a collective kind of suffering. And it reminds me so much of the women's movement in the early 70s that I was part of, and how we needed to have women's groups to talk about our experience, to talk about the oppression and the marginalization and the sort of condescension that we as women experienced in our personal and professional lives. And it was just so great to be with people who could, you could say stuff that you just couldn't say in so-called polite society. And it was very freeing. It was very liberating. And and since this practice, what we're here to do is to free our hearts. What was my heart freed from? It was freed from that sense of blame or shame, or somehow it's all my fault, or it's just me that is chafing under these conditions, or it frees our hearts from the sense of it being so personal. Now, you have to be able to pay attention to yourself personally. And if you can't do that, of course, that's a problem. But I think especially, I'll just say for my own teaching, there's been a kind of binary between the personal and the universal. And we use the personal, or I use my personal experience, and I share myself with you quite freely. I use my personal experience as a doorway to the universal, to the sense that this is something relatable that you can find in your own experience, in your own way, in your own iteration of that, whatever it looks like. And, so I feel now that, and I'm grateful to Larry Yang, because I feel like he really made this explicit in his book. And he also drew it into the arena of racialized experience. But that binary between the personal and universal now has the collective in there too. So personal, collective, universal. And it feels much healthier and much more inclusive to look at it that way. And actually just more true. It was certainly my experience in the early days in the women's groups, which were safe spaces for us. They were affinity groups. And affinity groups are really important for us in those days as women, and for me as a Buddhist practitioner, female Buddhist practitioner. I had to encounter the patriarchal experience of the patriarchal history of Buddhism, the marginalization of the nuns order, the nuns order dying out in India, where it was founded actually, while the monks' orders flourished. And why was this? And looking deeply into the causes and conditions for this, for the nuns, but also for the lay women, and the denigration of the feminine that was happening. And that is not what the Buddha taught at all. The Buddha was all inclusive, maybe needed a little nudge to include women initially in the community, because of course, in that day and age, that was absolutely taboo. But all people from all walks of life, from all castes, including the untouchable castes, which was unheard of, were welcome in the Buddha's community. And it was an oral tradition. And then later, as it began to be written down, and it was written down and commented upon by the monastics, I feel like that's when all the misogyny kind of entered in. So, as I said, Larry kind of brought this into brought this into racialized experience. But whatever, your location, whatever the body you inhabit, whatever realm it lives and moves and has its existence in, we need to bear witness to our suffering, to each other's suffering. The teachings of mindfulness are really about respect and dignity for experience and the experience of each other. I was listening to the radio in the car yesterday, and I heard, I didn't know what it was because I had tuned in later, it was just the end of, it turned out it was a slice of This American Life. It was maybe the last of the stories that were being replayed from that program. But I was really struck by it because it was an interview with a worker named Flato Alexander at a McDonald's. And Flato was talking about how it was for him working during the pandemic. I think the whole series was about workers in the pandemic, but I didn't listen to it all, just to that one segment that I happened to tune into. And Flato was talking about how, they worked through the pandemic, and he had worked at McDonald's for a long time. I think at that point, maybe 10 years, now 11 or 12, but really liked the job, liked the work. And it suited him because the McDonald's where he worked was near his house. He didn't have a vehicle, so he could walk to work. He liked the people he worked with, and so forth. And he was talking about how, it's hard work. He's alone at the grill from, I don't know, some ungodly early hour till 9, whenever, maybe 5 in the morning until 9 in the morning when people start coming in. But he was saying how he never minded even the low rate wage. It was not good, but whatever, until the pandemic. And for him, the tipping point was when McDonald's offered free meals to essential workers. And then they played some of the ads about essential workers and how essential you are, and we're going to offer these free meals to you. And it's a very, very kind of majestic advertisement. And he said he had never heard really that word, essential worker. And he thought, well, am I not an essential worker? And so McDonald's gave out free meals. They did it for 2 weeks and then they stopped, but they gave out 12 million free meals. And he said he started to calculate in his mind, like what it would cost to give out 12 million free meals. And he started to think about what he was being paid. And then he started to think about the fact that the higher up manager, I don't know what the title was, had disappeared for a long time. And noticed that when this individual came back, they didn't seem to actually see, or look directly at the people who were working and had been working and serving all along in the McDonald's. And he just went on to say how, for the first time in his life, he decided to to join some people who were striking for higher wages. And he had no intention. He didn't want to leave his job. He liked his job. He talked about how, he'd finish his shift at 5 and then go join the strikers and then come back to work. But it was interesting, and it was sad too, because it just made me think about, which I'm sure you've seen, all these help wanted signs in all the windows of various restaurants and establishments. The program went on to talk about signs that the, I guess they call her the moderator, had seen, the journalist, the reporter who was speaking in the story, where a sign it was like a Wendy's or Denny's somewhere in the South, where just like the whole group of people walked out and left a sign saying, "We quit," we quit. And basically the point of it was people were quitting their jobs because they didn't feel seen, they didn't feel cared for, they weren't made to feel that they mattered. There was a lack of respect and dignity and caring from their employers. And I felt like this was something, I don't know, it just helped me understand. Some people are saying, oh, you know, people were quitting because unemployment paid them more than their minimum wage. And probably in some cases, that's certainly true. But I think people, you know, we need to feel valued. We need to feel that what we do matters. We need to feel that whether we're volunteering like Caroline and Jim, who helps with posting all of these things on YouTube and editing, and, you know, the many hands at InsightLA of our team, of our volunteers, of our teachers, the many hands in any organization, in any business, in any enterprise that go into creating whatever is being created, need to be acknowledged and appreciated. This is a kind of outer mindfulness, external mindfulness, being aware of, we had a meal chant when I was practicing Zen, and it talked about appreciating the food and knowing how it comes to us, knowing how this food comes to us, the work of many hands, you know, the hours and hours of labor, of back-breaking labor that people have spent picking those berries that I love to eat, and then, you know, loading them into trucks and unloading them and putting them out in the store and all, you know, all that, not to mention the labor of the sun and the wind and the soil and the earthworms and everything else, the rain that we aren't having and wish we would here in the West. But I think, you know, part of our practice is to see when that external awareness, that the awareness of the collective is absent in us, and the suffering that's caused by that, and learning how to stay with it. And it's hard. I'll tell you personally, it's hard to stay with, you know, people who are talking about being harmed in a situation that I didn't think was harmful, but wow, they feel harmed. And I notice the impatience that rises in me. No, let's just build on our strengths. But no, we have to acknowledge these feelings. They need to be heard and acknowledged. Then, of course, it is time to begin to move on and build on strengths. That's not a practice in and of itself to stay with that, but to be able to stay with it long enough to understand, to feel not apart from a collective, but to hold hands with each other instead of wanting each other to just go away and stop being a pain or a problem or whatever. This is so important. You know, this is Sangha, community in the best sense, where we're practicing together, we're practicing mindfulness and compassion, and the courage to stay with the compassion, the heart that quivers and trembles and hurts with suffering, our own or each other's, or the suffering of the world. The climate report, right? I mean, I won't even start listing all the suffering in the world, but we're trying to create a community of practice together where we become wise in ourselves, wise and caring and self-compassionate, and wise and caring and compassionate with each other, so that we're looking at the suffering when it arises, and we're coming together and holding hands in saying, how can we end this? And how can we make things better? And when I say coming together and holding hands, it's not just some call for unity. No, there need to be safe spaces. There need to be affinity groups. This is essential. But let's not stop there. Let's also use the relief and release and freeing of our hearts that can happen as we begin to realize, as Nalika points out in her paper, she talks about these collective spaces, and I'm quoting, help meditators move from experiencing painful emotions as internal to their personal experience as individuals, and instead help relate their difficult emotions with those experienced and shared with other racialized minorities. And, building these kinds of safe spaces in our communities, it's not only the compassionate thing to do, to foster this kind of collective experience of racialized embodiment, or whatever other kind of embodiment has been marginalized, invisibilized, and sort of pushed out of the circle of compassion in our society. It's really important. And I think it's again, that joining of inner, collective, and universal that's necessary in order for us to genuinely hold hands and walk together on this path.